Costco too.
Yeah. So we'll use some food here just to reinforce the moments that she releases that pressure and comes towards me. We got one in there already. Perfect. If you want, you can throw that back onto the phone.
And jumping, as you noticed. Okay,
Yeah.
up here.
Yeah, and that's
But
something
she
we can
doesn't do
address
that with me, really. She does it with
other people.
other people. She gets excited if somebody comes to the house. Well,
Yeah, and it's certainly something we can address with both the remote collar and our prong collar. So what we're going to do again is go through this conditioning process. So you can just stand back over there and use the whole room here, as much space as we can. And what the idea here is to teach her that if she feels that pressure, it turns off by coming back to me, and she'll get a reward from me and some praise when she does that. What we should see after a few repetitions is her avoiding hitting the end of that leash and turning with me, good girl, and turning with me every time I take a turn. And that's when you'll see she gets more engaged with me than the rest of the environment. Good girl. Freak. Do you walk around the left or right side?
this side, right.
Right side? Okay, so I'm gonna try and keep that consistent. I sometimes struggle with that. I do left side for some reason.
That's because that's in English.
Yeah, is it English? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay, so we were
And
having
here,
that.
that means your dog's on the sidewalk on the outside, right?
Well, we were having a debate about that with another client. Because I've always just learned that from people that train sport work and stuff, and the left side is like the standard side for the heel. And yeah, I was wondering where that originated, if it has something to do with
English, yes.
traffic or what. So she's a very good girl, very responsive to this. So you can see we can use very light amounts of pressure.
She needs to sit when you stop. She's learned that.
Okay, so right now I'm not too concerned with that because I don't want to connect too many dots at once. Right now I'm only concerned about her learning this leash pressure. I get what you're saying with that sitting when I stop, and I'm perfectly okay if she does want to sit. But realistically, I'm going to stop because I don't have
She doesn't even go.
room to move. Good girl. Good girl. So I'm just applying gentle pressure. Good girl, now she's avoiding it. And that's what we're kind of looking for. And that's when I'll start to really praise her and let her know that that's what I want her to do. Good girl. Good. And then we can start to use that to actually kind of control where she's going. Good girl. So see how it's just a quick little pop with the leash? Good girl. And then I release that pressure immediately. Good, and that's she's learning there that she can avoid that by simply following me, and then she never feels that pressure in the first place. Good girl. A few things we want to make sure we're not doing with the prong collar, and this is kind of why I wanted you to switch that off for a moment when I went to get those treats, is apply constant pressure unless we're using that constant pressure to communicate. What I'll see a lot of people do who have a habit of kind of using a leash and collar, like a flat collar or a harness, they'll often have pressure applied almost the entire time they're walking and they don't even realize it. So they'll just basically have this lifted right up here. And you can see she almost starts to kind of like freak out a little bit because she doesn't know what to do because there's no communication happening. And so you have to make sure we're always using our leash and collar to communicate and not to restrain. So in this situation here, the communication is coming from those gentle little pops when she hits the end of that leash, and the release, good girl. The moment that she turns back towards me, that pressure releases. And then the other aspect is her avoiding that altogether by just turning with me. And so once we start to do these exercises, especially like outdoors, in different environments, you start to see your dog far more engaged with you than, like I said, the rest of the environment. And it's not necessarily because you're holding food in front of their face or anything like some people will kind of do. Good girl. Good. Good girl. Yeah, exactly, right? You'll see some protests with that, especially like she's handling this really well, I would say. Some dogs, they'll start to like jump and paw at that leash. They'll start to do all sorts of funky stuff when they feel that kind of control, I guess, is really based, and they're feeling controlled, right? And then previously, it's like they're so used to just yanking through all of that pressure and not really caring that much about it. And that's why you're having to, yank up on it constantly, tell her commands constantly. And it's because she doesn't really find it actually, aversive, right? But now it's kind of aversive for her, and she's trying to figure out some other ways to work through that aren't doing what I'm telling her to do, or in this case, guiding her to do. And so you might see her start to like spin around on the leash. She might try to pull over towards you. Like I said, I would say she's generally doing really, really well compared to a lot of dogs. in terms of how she's responding to this. She's very quick to pick it up. And it's just a matter of really making sure, good, like those little confusing moments there, right? That we're really working her through that to let her know that that's just not really the appropriate response with the prong collar. And the way we do that is just by doing more of these back and forth. And I'll also turn into the dog like this. And that's where she struggles, is when I turn into her head. I'm noticing. Good girl. So we'll just get her a little more used to this as well, okay? And this is basically a simple leash handling exercise that really helps to get our dog to get more in tune with you and a little bit less focused on that leash keeps hitting on the head too, okay? Good. Good. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. And so just allowing her to turn with us without feeling that pressure. Good. Yeah, it's turning in her head. She kind of gets a little bit spooked at that. Good girl. Nice work. You wouldn't believe how difficult it is for me to adapt to the right side one.
Oh, you can do the left.
No, no. It's okay. It's okay. I want you to do what you're comfortable with as well. And you know, I've actually started, like, I want to kind of change that with myself, and I was kind of talking to my assistant about that this the other day, changing it to the right side. Most of my clients kind of prefer it, and it just makes more sense. Obviously, like you said, people are passing more on the right side. But
The person on the left, right here.
Yeah, and so that makes you want to do that, right? And so another big reason for that too, for the arm to the right side there, or on the left side, is so the dog's not crossing in front of you in the event that they do that, because then you're getting tripped by the dog too, right? And that can also be just as bad, right? And so, I mean, again, it is all preference in that regard, of course. And if she's used to the right, then we'll keep her used to the left. We won't confuse her. Good girl. Good girl. And basically, this is what we would call getting her tuned up, getting her, again, conditioned to the prong collar, but tuning up her leash walking abilities just by doing these back and forth figure eights with her. And once we can get her to the point where she's a little more relaxed doing this, then we can start to move on to some different stuff. Good girl. But not until she's kind of figured out exactly what we're asking her to do in this situation. And so we'll do this in all sorts of different environments with the dog. When we go to new places and stuff, we'll do this like in the parking lot of a store, then inside the store. We'll do this on our walks too, until it gets to the point that the dog is basically just in this natural heel position a good portion of that time. Good girl. That is so good. So you can have her stop and sit. Good girl. You can reward her for that. She got spooked by the treat snapping. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know why she's so...
She's quite on alert, like, right?
Yeah.
She's like very, very, like, triggered by all these little things very easily. Even just like me moving around and stepping in front of her, she's like, I gotta get away from this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And that tells me that she's dealing with quite a bit of anxiety, right? And so what we need to work through with that is gonna be getting her, again, it comes down to control and leadership and getting her to feel more comfortable with you taking the wheel with certain situations. Because right now, she's just kind of like, you walk in here and she's all over the place, moving, sniffing all over, and she's off in her own world basically, and she has no idea that you're there to guide her, because we're not technically doing it in a way that she understands. We don't have the proper control over her or the proper state of mind to do that. So she's off in her own world, and that creates anxiety because now she's worried. Like, now I got to worry about this. Now I got to worry about that. Now I got to, see what's over here. Constantly thinking about what's kind of coming next instead of just staying in the moment, listening to you, following your commands. And, just deferring to you in the event that she's maybe not in a command, but something exciting or alarming happens. She's not just ready to react on her own. She's ready to say, like, hey, what do you want me to do here? Can I just relax, or do you want me to, get up? Those kinds of things. And so getting her to that point, good girl, where she can do that is what we're looking to do here. Now, when it comes to the other dog and stuff at home too, that's kind of the other thing that we're going to address a little bit here as we go forward. I'll bring up another dog and kind of see how she responds to that. But the first and foremost thing here is using our prong collar to hold her accountable for commands like that sit. So if I say sit to her, right? Sit. Good. What I can do there is say sit, and you were actually doing it just fine with your other leash and collar with the martingale, just applying that upward pressure. You're just going to be a lot more gentle with the prong collar when you do that. So if I want to make her sit with the prong collar, it should just be very gentle. The moment she sits, that pressure releases, right? And again, that's that idea of pressure release, which you have, good girl, which you have a good concept of.
Yeah, because I've been using the slip collar for the walks now. The slip, I've got a slip.
And that works decently well for her, do you
Yeah,
find? Or?
she's gotten better.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of slip leashes too, and it's
Yeah.
often what we'll train the dogs on when they're also on an e-collar as well. But when it comes to just using like a leash and a collar, something like a prong collar is just so effective.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to giving meaningful corrections, which is the hardest part with a slip leash, because you kind of
Yeah.
have to.
I like this one because you don't have to get yanked.
You don't at all. Even when they're giving a
Yeah.
correction, which I haven't really had the opportunity to show you, but we will when the dog kind of comes up. We can be very gentle with it. So in the event here that she breaks this sit, one thing I find so many people doing is they're always just saying, no, sit,
Yeah.
and then applying that pressure and releasing when the dog sits. But there isn't actually a correction in that process at any point. So when she breaks that sit, what I want to do is mark it with no, give that correction, and then guide her back into that sit with that leash pressure. So first comes that correction for her breaking that sit. So if we get her to break that sit without even, constantly, no, good sit. We can correct her into that sit. Now she might get a little spooked by me moving around her like this, so we'll kind of take it slow with that. Good girl. Take it slow and steady with that. Working on intermittently, just kind of rewarding her as we go through that duration, especially because she was a little spooked when I don't want her to know that that's not something she needs to worry about, but at the same time, making sure she understands, good girl, that staying in the sit is not what, or breaking the sit, I should say, is not acceptable, right? I'm going to say no, correct it. You see there, like when I said no and corrected, she kind of just put herself right back into that sit anyway. You can scratch that now. She kind of put herself back into that, no, good girl. So just like that, right? And then, so I actually won't reward that because she did break the command, and I'll have her just work on that duration a little longer. Good. And now it's kind of making it clear that there's actually a consequence for breaking that sit, not just we're just going to guide her back into that position. And again, that's what I mean by like, the dog doesn't really see that as a consequence for breaking that command, so you constantly see her breaking that command. It's like, you said sit, no, good girl. You said sit, and then she's like, there for 2 seconds, gets distracted, goes over here, you pull her back, guide her into that sit, she sits again, but there's really no actual consequence other than just guiding her back to that spot every time. And so saying no, giving that correction, and then redirecting her back to the sit is kind of the idea behind that. Good girl. Good girl. You're going to have to kind of walk me through the commands that you use with her potentially. Hey, or you said English too, right? Okay, so you do use English for all that stuff. Good. Yeah, that's good. So I don't want to learn a new language today. It's not today. Good girl. And now ideally she's a little more in tune with our work and handling with her here. So what I want to do here is have you do a little bit of this back and forth work with her with the leash. And then we'll probably swap out once more. I'll bring up the dog and I'll kind of work you through this process as well, okay? So here, if you want to come grab the leash from me. Good. You can switch her, walk around that right side there. And what you're going to do is, and so like right off the bat, if she starts to be jumping like that, you're going to give that no command. What do you say for that?
I said down.
Okay, yeah, so
No.
yeah, that's an important distinction there. You don't want to be giving a command that means something else in that event, right? Because in that situation, again, really giving her a down in that situation is giving her another command, basically, although it's really not the down command, so that's another kind of gray or muddy water area that I would avoid. But really, you're still not applying a consequence, you're directing her. We always say correct and then direct. So first correct her for jumping, no. Pop on that leash and collar, which I'll show you how to do after I didn't expect it there. And then you can tell her sit. Once she's already, like you've corrected, because she'll already pretty much probably be sitting, right? Or down or whatever. But no and correction for that behavior of jumping on you, and then direct her to the next behavior that you want, the alternative behavior, which is usually sitting. So now you can say heel or whatever your walking command is, and just start walking around the room with her, keeping that leash nice and relaxed. And I would turn, you're fine, that's okay, just settle her down there, just no power sit, there you go, release that pressure on the leash there, and just walk back and forth with her around the room. Yeah, she's just way more rambunctious with you on the leash. I would keep her on that right side.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to.
And she's gonna, well, she just figured that out now, so she won't probably do that same thing again, so. You kind of want to ease into that, but at the same time.
I didn't mean to.
That's no, exactly. She did it her own, she corrected herself, but you didn't do it, right? That's her fault for doing that silly behavior, and now it won't happen again. I would focus on turning away from her to start with, just so she's getting used to that leash pressure. But honestly, now she's kind of going to be like, okay, I get it, I'm not going to turn away from you. Like I said, you don't necessarily want to jump into it that quick with something like that, but That's kind of how they learn, like I just said, right? It's like they'll learn, okay, that was uncomfortable, so maybe I won't rush away from my owner like that. Because that's her whole issue right there. It's like, I'm just thinking for myself right now. Now she's like, oh crap, I gotta listen to this person holding the leash because there's actually some way for me to be held accountable. Good
Can
girl.
I just take a go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good girl.
You can embrace
Good
that.
girl.
So, like I said, a little bit of a startling moment, but you recovered well, and she did learn from that moment. So it's certainly one of those things where I would say that she's definitely a very vocal dog, though. Like even there, it's like she really didn't hit it that hard or anything, and she's just vocalizing to kind of surprise her. You can praise her when she's walking nicely next to you like that too. And yeah, you can certainly throw some of those turns into her as well. That's perfect.
Oh, because I said good girl?
That's good, yeah. So like if you're turning into her like that, she kind of stops just so you could keep going around her, and she'll kind of figure out what you're doing there. It's more so just a small space, and that's where a little bit of that confusion comes from. That is really nice though. She's working really nicely with you on that leash after that one little kind of correction. But like I said, it's like she kind of was thinking for herself there, like, okay, my owner has the leash now I can act for myself. And so she tried to run right out the room into the next room there and got a correction on the end of that leash. You brought her back into that heel position, and now she knows how to avoid that correction, which is not doing that behavior.
But she's always in front of me. Like, I thought she's supposed to be, because she's...
I do like the dog to be behind your right leg, and
yeah.
we can certainly get into addressing that. Right now, I want her to focus on just following you and doing well with that. And so it's like, she's doing super well with it to the point that I can't almost address certain things. But it's like, if she was to stop and like, say, take a sniff of the couch or whatever while you're walking with her, keep walking basically, and just apply a little bit of that pressure. She'll kind of get a little pop on that prong collar, and you'll keep walking, and she'll snap right back to that heel. And again, kind of like what happened there, she'll realize I'm not supposed to think for myself in this situation. I gotta follow my feet right. I can't just stop to sniff whatever I want.
I guess I should hold on to it tighter, because I turn and then she doesn't come exactly and it just slips through my hand.
Yeah, and so just give a little, as soon as you notice she's not coming, just give a little squeeze with your fingers there and pull her along. And you're just trying to be nice and gentle there. And that's, yeah, so that's good. That's perfect. So now as you walk past, I'm going to just kind of squeak on this point, see what she does, and I'll have you actually walk past with her on the other side. Yeah, exactly, if we can situate that. And then I'm going to squeeze this, and if she kind of stops and looks over, just give her a little note and a pop on that. Perfect, and now keep walking. Perfect. Good stuff. Yeah, that actually really is. That's perfect. So I would maybe use a little bit more of a firm pop then on that leash, okay? So that's good. You can kind of judge it there. There you go. That's yeah, that's okay. You're
that's
good.
From the
no, keep going. Keep going. Yeah, just
that's
recover.
from the
Relax it. Relax it. You're good. No, that was. I like it. I like it. I'm into it. That's what we. Okay, so this is good. This is so. Stop right there for a second, because that is a good little example. Again, yeah, maybe a touch rambunctious on the correction. She's figuring it out though, because she didn't yelp in surprise or anything. She's figuring it out. I don't want you to think that that was wrong or anything for that correction. Like, I kind of like the snappiness and the force behind it. Again, you could have maybe toned it down a touch, but it's better to err on the side of a little higher than a little too low in those situations. Because the first one was really nagging. You said no and corrected a bunch of times. That one you said no, gave a firm pop, she immediately stopped, came back to you, got a little confused, so you recovered over that heel, and then you walked past again. And this is where it really gets interesting with the work that I like to do, especially regarding dogs like this, especially regarding situations like the puppy that you have at home and her reactivity, is we're actually almost trying to create and encourage that avoidance, right? Because it's like, so here's me squeaking this toy, something she really wants to move towards, and then you walk on by, and you said no and gave her a pop, and then you came past and walked by again, and she remembered that moment, so instead of trying to move towards what interested her, she decided to walk around it, and then pay attention to where you were going instead, right? Stay away from that, move away from it, and then pay attention to where you're going instead of that thing back there. She didn't keep looking back at it or anything, she just stepped over to that side. And so that's what we would call creating a bit of an avoidance response of that trigger. So previously something she wanted to rush towards, she's now decided that she would rather stay away from it instead because you said no in regards to that item. And so when it comes to say like another dog, basically replace that squeaky toy with me standing over the dog, and we want the same thing. It's like, so we're walking past the dog on the sidewalk, I would rather just step off a little like this and show you that you can avoid that instead of you thinking that you need to rush over there. So, you know, a little bit in the early, bits of the process, you might see the dog trying to step around to the side as we cross paths with maybe a dog, or in this case the toy there. And what we'll do is just simply guide her back to that heel, let her know we'd rather stay in that heel, and we can start to just watch that and basically do what we call advocating for and just stepping a little bit out around that item, so she doesn't feel like she needs to avoid it, we're avoiding it for her, but we'll get into that.
So just like when she did there, it won't hurt her too much, because I'm just thinking if
No,
there's a
it's-
bike or something, she will like pull.
Yeah, and
she
so
hurts herself.
we need to get into
Yeah.
that, right? We need to get into those situations of like actually really finding out what like triggers her. So we'll step outside here and kind of see. There's not going to be much going on with how crappy it is
No.
today, unfortunately. But you said like cars and stuff too.
Oh yeah, anything with the tires, she
Get her
just,
going.
or the sound or of the tires, I think it is.
Mhm.
Some bikes she goes after, some she doesn't.
I've got some bikes here we can use. I'll pull
Yeah.
out a bike too, but I don't have my assistant unfortunately.
I think I have to train too, because I'm used to that, the other collar, and you pull twice up,
Yeah,
is
you
what I learned,
yeah,
and that's
so-
why I was doing what, like, you know,
Yeah.
that hard and.
Yeah, you
so
need
it's
to, you
yeah,
definitely
I
need
feel
to
there.
kind of just practice by doing
Yeah.
these little exercises and stuff, and we'll set this up again.
Just
here.
one pull.
And
Yeah.
ideally, yeah, like mark it with no, so I would say like
Say
your
no, yeah.
correction command, and then give the correction, because then she's gonna know that that correction is coming from you, although obviously it's a leash and collar, so
Yeah.
she knows that, but just adding that no will allow her to have a bit of a warning as well,
Okay.
that you're still gonna correct, even
So
if she.
first you say no and then you pull.
Exactly, and then we correct, right? And
Okay.
honestly, I like your correction. It's just you can tone it down a little bit, but it's
Yeah.
snappy. It's a quick snap. And often I find people like pull up and just hold the
Yeah.
pressure. You're not doing that, so that's perfect. You might just be able to tone it down a bit. Now I'm gonna go back there with that squeaky, walk
Okay.
past, do the same thing again. What we should see is her maybe start to look like a little bit of an avoidance response from it, and you can just praise her, keep her in that heel position. So basically, if you're walking with her in your right side, walking around, you come up to me standing here with the squeaky toy, walk up and just say, you can say heel or not even say anything, just walk like this and then come back around. Does that make sense? So just step it
Yeah.
a tiny bit away from me, okay? If you need to correct her again, okay? Just no little pop on that leash and collar.
Just walking a bit first.
Yeah, go for it. Yep, perfect. Just praise her when she's walking in that nice heel position. You can change your pace, you can speed it up and slow
She's
it
not
down.
going near you.
Yeah, and that's okay. So if you want, you can just use that leash and collar to guide her back onto that right side when she does try to come off to that left side.
So just pull a bit.
Just
Do I
a
say
little
no?
bit of no, you can just apply a gentle pressure to pull her back into the proper heel position on your right side. So go walk past me here. Just gentle pressure there. Perfect. Yep, there you go. Good. No, you're fine. And that's where I would just apply almost consistent pressure, which is something I kind of told you not to do. But in that situation, I would just apply a little bit of like, just like you're guiding her, like you're like saying, pulling her over in the direction. Not so much. Perfect. Keep walking. Yep, you just keep on walking. She's just trying to figure out what, there you go. Beautiful. She's trying to figure out again what else works in this situation. Maybe I just sit down, right? Maybe I just sit down and avoid that. Just a bit of, keep walking. Yep, you just got to keep walking with her. There you go.
She's not coming to my side.
So just use the leash to kind of pull her to your side. So instead of like trying to pop on that leash, let me steal it for a second. Basically, right side. So feel like this right now. I'm kind of having to pull her right to the right. So if she starts to pull over to that other side, I'm going to use the leash to kind of pull her back into this position. So she's not getting it from me at the moment, obviously, because she's kind of goes here. So if she does step out into the side here, I'm just going to kind of pull her over this way, right? Just like this. Just like that, right? Does that make sense?
So pull her, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So just kind of gently pulling her. So not popping the leash in that situation.
Okay.
Because in that situation right there, I just want to guide her back into the heel. That's all I want to do right now is guide her back into that heel position. And the way I'll do that is by using that constant leash pressure. But where the confusion is coming from is you're kind of stopping and like looking to see what she's doing. And stuff.
I'm gonna hurt her.
No, absolutely, and
Okay.
it's like it's obviously it's an understandable response here, but it's like it's again that is how this works is by making
Yeah.
it slightly uncomfortable. You just need to make sure your communication is very clear with her, and yeah, in that case, it's not necessarily clear because you're stopping and you're checking, and she's confused because she thinks she needs to sit then. So like right here, right, just pull right there, just pulling on the leash. Good. So anytime she deviates from this position, I'm just gonna kind of gently pull on that leash. I'm only popping the leash like that firm
When it's a
snap.
no.
If it's a no, when I'm trying to correct her from moving towards something, right, that she's not supposed to move towards. Good girl. Good girl. And then just gentle pressure on, pressure off when she's in this position. Good girl. Nice work. Good girl. So give that a shot, okay? Just walk around with it for a second like that. We'll pull that back out a second and go from there. I would put your switch your right hand there, so you just flip it around opposite direction. So your pinky is pointed down towards, just like that. Perfect. There you go. Even lower your hand down a little bit. Just keep your arm nice and relaxed. There you go. If you want, that's good. You could take some slack out of that leash, but that's probably good right there.
Take some slack out.
No, she's good. She's good. She's following perfectly with you right now, so that's good. And just like slow your pace down, speed it up a little bit. You walk a little bit quick there, so I would slow it down. And it's good to walk fast, especially when you're going through your walks and stuff. But right now, I want her to just focus and get in tune with you and match your pace. There you go, nice. If she starts to creep ahead like that, you can just guide her back using that leash pressure, like I told you, right? Just by gently pulling her back behind you into that position. Good.
So should I be looking down at her or just?
No, you can just check in with her once in a while, let her know, good girl. And like when you do that, you can make some eye contact with her, and even just that eye contact is often very motivating for them when that happens. So now she's gonna start to avoid it. She knows that that's squeaky towards her. She's like, okay, I do not want to keep going there. So just keep walking past and just keep on going. There you go, beautiful. Relieve that pressure. And you just keep doing that confidently, okay? Good, there you go. Do that a couple more times and then she realizes, oh, okay, we don't need, because right now she's kind of thinking, oh, my owner's worried about this thing too, because it's like there was that squeak, she popped that leash, and now she's kind of stopping and hesitating every time I see that thing too. And so you just want to let her know that I'm good with this. You just need to stay nice and relaxed with that. Good girl. Good. Much better. And you can give her a little bit of praise there.
Yes, yes.
Nice. And that's where I'll even like reward the dog from you. In the event that when they walk by and just totally ignore that thing, then we'll say, good girl, we'll reward her. You know, some food or something. If you use praise, whatever's better for you. Good girl.
Yes.
That was good, yeah.
Yes.
And you're really waiting for that moment of forward movement. You just say no and give that little correction, which it looked like you were waiting for it and she didn't do it. It's perfect. So that's good. Okay, so if you just want to stop right there, I'm gonna go grab a dog here. I'm gonna bring a dog in. And we're gonna kind of see where she's at with that. You know what? Let's instead of that, let's change it up. Let's go downstairs. Let's go pull out a bike and let's work around that a little bit, okay?